Are you ready?
Ready.
All right, let's go. Kevin here, top 1 financial advisor and best-selling author. We are here to talk about the stock market. Today, we need to talk about IBonds. I have avoided the topic of IBonds all year long because it was a very crowded topic, but one of y'all asked about, like, hey, what are my thoughts about them, how they work, so on and so forth. So today, I'm going to get into it. I'm a man of the people. When you ask questions, I make videos. It makes my job easy, and I want to be helpful for y'all. All right, so we're going to break down what IBonds are, what my personal thoughts are about them, and then what are the pros and cons. Now, I personally have not, I don't think I've really addressed it on the channel. One, because it was a really crowded topic. Also, I have been featured in other articles and podcasts talking about them, but y'all didn't ask me to talk about it, so I didn't talk about it. But now I get to talk about it. So let's go ahead and break this down. So an I-bond, let's start with the bond part of it. That's a loan that you make to a government or a company, and you say, look, I'm going to give you $10,000, $1,000, whatever it is. And then in 10 years and 1 year and 5 years, you're going to give me that principal back, and you're going to pay me an interest rate on top of that. Well, what makes I-bond special is that the rate that you are getting paid is adjustable and it moves with inflation, which means that this is one of the few investments ever that you can be guaranteed that you are not going to lose money. In some cases, or in a regular case, a non-I-bond case, I can put in $10,000, I can make a little bit of money, but inflation goes up and my $10,000 isn't worth $10,000 anymore. It's worth $9,000, it's worth $8,000, just because the cost of everything else has been exorbitant, which it has been, especially for things like food. Well, an I-bond comes out here and says, well, we will adjust. If inflation is high, we're going to adjust our rate, make sure you're going to have at least the same buying power for your $10,000. Right now, at the time that we are recording, the I-bond rate is, I think, 9.62%. Which is, I mean, that's a guaranteed 9.62%. That ain't bad, especially in a year where the stock market is down. Well, today, as of this recording, I'm recording this at lunchtime, the stock market is actually up. But we were down around 20% or so, depending on what time you're watching this video. So getting a guaranteed 9%, that's good. And come November 1st, the Treasury is going to reset these rates, and probably for one of the first times, I can't say first time ever, but one of the first times we've seen in a while, the interest rate could be above 10%, which you are getting a guaranteed 10% return. I mean, that's really unheard of when you talk about guarantees. It's hard to promise anybody anything, but in the case of I-bonds, it's one of the few times you'll ever hear me say guaranteed or even inflation proof, because these are actually inflation proof. That's how they are built. Now, the interest rate behind I-bonds work like this. They give you a fixed rate, and then they give you the inflation adjusted rate. You put those together and they call that the composite rate. Right now, that's the 9.62% that you get. Every year you can put up to $10,000. That is the maximum that you can put into an I-bond. However, if you get a tax refund, you can put in an additional $5,000. Now, if you're really, really savvy, you can start to, get, let's say, $10,000 for me, $10,000 for the wife, $10,000 for the kids. Now we got $30,000 as a maximum that we can put into I-bonds. You can do that. So that's one way to kind of, double up the benefit here. But there are drawbacks. Here are the drawbacks. You put your money inside of an I-bond, it must be locked up for a minimum of 1 year. That's it. So once you put it in and you're getting your guaranteed return, all that stuff is great. It's fine. But you cannot just say, hey, look, let me pull this money out and then go and do something else. It's in there. It has to be in there for a minimum of a year. If you break that and take it out beforehand, then you lose out on the interest and you just get back whatever money that you have. So there's that. Also, if you take out before 5 years, you lose like the last quarter's worth of interest, which I think if you had it for like 5 years, if you had it 3 or 4 years, you probably got what you need to get out of it. So those are the benefits and the drawbacks. How do I personally feel about it? For me, I think that there are a few things. For me, it's a great way to protect your money. If you are extremely concerned about inflation, if you are not someone who wants to sit here and stomach a lot of what's going on in the stock market, it absolutely makes sense. The downside, though, is if I'm putting up $10,000, I'm only guaranteed to make a maximum of $962. And that's assuming I even have $10,000 to begin with. But that's it. That is the maximum I could do. I would have to go, and this is a maybe a petty complaint, but it's an honest complaint. A lot of people, I think they just refreshed it, but the Treasury Direct page is not fun. It is not sexy. It is not as easy as the apps that most of us use today. All that aside, I'm looking to protect my money. I probably don't care what the website looks like, so that is fine. However, the other downside is, again, if I'm waiting an entire year, we don't know what the market is going to do between now and then. I may feel pessimistic. I may, think that X, Y, and Z may happen. It may not. And what happens if you took $10,000 out of the market, put it into something like an IBond, you get the guaranteed 9.62% or whatever it will be here in the future, and the market takes off and the market's up 20%. Then what? Right? The market was up 20%. I think it was up double digits in 2021. It was up double digits in 2020. So it can happen in 2023. We don't know. But that is one thing that you could be risking, because 9.62% sounds great today. And I'm not going to argue with you. It is good. It is definitely good today. However, a year from now, market's up, 30%. Then you're like, well, you didn't lose, but you really would have wished that you had kept it somewhere else. So there is a trade-off there. The other thing that I will bring up on the iBond side is, it's a great way to protect your money, not necessarily a great way to grow, but also interest rates, or the inflation rate, can also be adjusted downward too. It is not a 9.2% guaranteed income for the rest of your life, or for at least 30 years, because that's the maximum that you can hold these for. That's when they mature. That's not the case. Okay, so I wish it were, and I think a lot of people got so high into these bonds because it was like, oh, I think I'm guaranteeing myself 9% return for the next 30 years, and I'm set for life. That's not necessarily true, but also even at $10,000 a year, yes, it's going to add up. Yes, it's going to compound, but eventually, when inflation rates do start to come down, then that interest on those bonds are slowly going to start to come down too. So that part is adjustable, and I want to make you aware of that. So yes, you can get maybe 9%, maybe 10% for a year, which is good. Definitely not going to hate on that. But should inflation start to fall, which I think we all want it to do within the next year, the next 2 years, then that rate is slowly going to be adjusted down. The last thing I'll say is this: there are no true downsides other than the opportunity cost. Other than saying, I took it, I'm taking a 9% return, and I could have had, 18% return. That's assuming that you were even invest in something that could even get you that amount. You may not. But outside of that, I don't really see any downsides, especially at this rate. It works if you are someone who has the money that you weren't going to use, that you don't need for an emergency. It absolutely makes sense. What I would not do, especially when we expect a recession, I would not take my emergency fund and do it. I wouldn't take, obviously, the money I'm using for bills and stuff like that. I wouldn't do it for anything like that. But if I have long-term goals, or maybe I take half of my savings or a portion of my savings, say a third of it, say, look, I'm not going to use this money. I know I'm not going to need it for a year at minimum. I might as well put this in the iBond, let that cook, and then after a year, 2 years, you can withdraw and do whatever it is you need to do with it. But you also always want to retain some level of flexibility. We always talk about this in finance, that 3 to 6 months is always like that little bit of liquidity that you're always going to need in case something happens. So you don't want to put that part of your savings in. But any long-term money you got just laying around, go ahead. Might as well make sense. Again, no serious downsides other than opportunity costs. Do I own any? Personally, no. I'm not 100% sure for me that it is worth the maximum of $962. For me, it's not worth it, because I'm still, in my belief and what I'm looking at in the stock market, I'm still buying things at a discount. And I think in 5 years, I think in 2 years, I think in 3 years, whatever number you want to put there, let's say if I put $10,000 in Apple today, it's going to be worth significantly more than what this iBond is going to be worth in 10 years, in 5 years, whatever year you want to look at. So that's how I'm personally looking at it. I feel like my returns are going to be higher, and the stock market has proven this over time, than what iBonds should give me over time. So that's how I'm looking at it. If you want to do it, there's absolutely no shade because again, it's solid, it's guaranteed. You're not going to lose anything unless you break it and pull out early. But I'm just looking at the long term. IBonds have been here for a while. The only reason why they're popular now is because we haven't seen this type of inflation in like 40 years. So that's one reason why they've become a lot more popular. They trend, and they've definitely been trendy the majority of the year. The last thing, I'll reiterate this again because a lot of people, depending on if you're on TikTok or whatever, misconstrued this. It is not a savings account. You can't just go in and out like you want to. So you want to be aware of that as well. All right, if you have any additional questions about IBonds, feel free to let me know. The last thing I'll mention, I know I'm kind of ranting and just giving you things that I'm just thinking about. I will say this. So yes, you can get that additional $5,000 if you get a refund from your taxes. It doesn't always make sense to get a refund from your taxes because that means that you're overpaying now and you're having less in your paycheck today and every 2 weeks or whenever you get paid in a time where you're paying inflation and then taking that money and getting it all back in a refund. So you want to be careful there. I wouldn't try and game the system and say, I need to get this extra $5,000 so I can put it back into an IBond for a year at 9%. So all depends on how you look at it. Those are my thoughts. Hopefully I was helpful. If it wasn't, just let me know. Say, hey, look, can you just be more organized in what you're thinking? But wanted to make it conversational. All right, so that is it for me. If you want to learn more about any investing topics, if you want deep dive breakdowns, what I'm looking at, how I'm looking at certain things, and make sure you check out the members only. We just released a video on Friday where I put out several of my favorite stocks and things that are on my watch list based on what we're seeing right now. I want to do some analysis and give you guys some tips on what ratios to use, which ones make sense, which ones do not, and we'll talk a little bit about those as well. All right, that is it for me today. I'll talk to you later. Bye.